A second grand jury refuses to indict yet another white police officer who choked to death a black man in New York City. We'll talk about this and more on today's program.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
A Staten Island grand jury has refused to indict Officer Daniel Pantaleo for the death of Eric Garner. You see in this video the scuffle that led to Mr. Garner, God rest his soul, his demise. I have watched the news extensively, and I'm going to comment to you from my gut and from my heart and ask you for pause and prayer. This is not like the situation with Michael Brown. The killing of Michael Brown, the grand jury refused to indict Officer Wilson because shots were fired in the car. Brown was trying to get Wilson's gun and kill him with it. Other African Americans testified before the grand jury that Michael Brown was rushing at the officer when they thought to attack him. And that's when Officer Wilson fired fatal shots in protection of his life. Those facts seem to not matter to an awful lot of people, but they are the facts nonetheless. And as I said in a prior show, Mr. Obama's reaction to the grand jury was despicable because, in my opinion, he fueled the fires of racial animus as well as the violence that occurred in Ferguson. But concerning Mr. Eric Garner, here he was, a 43-year-old man who was allegedly selling cigarettes, onesies, as they're called in the street. Cigarettes in New York City, for a pack of smokes, it's about $10 right now because the powers that be up there are trying to drive tobacco use as far out of the state as possible. So it's, if my understanding is correct, it's the heaviest tax state in the union. So if a person doesn't want to plunk down $10 for a pack of cigarettes, maybe they can find somebody like Eric Garner who will sell them one cigarette for $1. All right? So he's making a profit on his cigarettes. And the police came, and evidently Garner had just broken up a fight. You can hear that. And there's another man who's there saying that some fight had happened and Garner helped break it up. He's a big fella. And the police want to arrest him and take him in. Over cigarettes? Really? Selling one at a time? I mean, I want you to think this through with me. There are prostitution rings in New York City, and the police know exactly where they are. Okay? Exactly where they are. And they let them flourish. You're going to choke out a prostitute? You're going to put a prostitute in a chokehold and kill her if she doesn't come to the car? Or are you just going to not arrest her? They know where drug deals are taking place. Day after day after day after day. Drug deals. Marijuana purchases, joints being sold, day after day. They know exactly where they are. They know who's doing it. And generally speaking, they don't arrest him. So they're going to arrest this man for selling onesies, cigarettes? In my opinion, because I've been arrested a number of times by the police, spent a lot of time in jail for peaceful protest against the murder of babies by abortion. In my opinion, it's just my opinion, can't prove it, there was some kind of payback there. There was something else at play. And what was it? I don't know. There are many New York City police that are still on the take. There's a lot of bribery that goes on in New York. It's a police culture that goes back well over 100 years where policemen did not make enough money, and so they were involved in taking bribes from criminals. And that culture has continued to this day. They've tried very hard to eradicate it from the New York City system. I was in New York City once, watched a cop go in to a bar, little diner thing there, and opened up his coffee lid, and they poured a couple of shots of whiskey into his cup. He put the lid back on and got back in his cruiser. Now, he wasn't driving that night. There was 2 cops. He was the one that was in the passenger side. But clearly, he shouldn't have done that. And clearly, there was some known relationship between him and the bartender. Why would the bartender just pour that drink in there for him? So, this poor soul is dead. 6 children. His widow is livid. Had the press conference with Al Sharpton. And we have to remember, as we discuss this, and I'm going to take a quick break, but we have to remember that this is not like Michael Brown. This man was not a violent threat to the police. The man was not trying to grab anyone's gun. He was not trying to kill anyone. And the officer used what is now an illegal chokehold and killed him in broad daylight. I'll be right back.
You have 2 choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
Should we always do what the police tell us to do? I was talking with a friend about this who said, well, the cops gave him an order. He should have done what the cops said. And, we discussed the overall lack of respect for authority that is plaguing our country. And it is. We have discussed, as others have, the tension and the fear that exists when African American males are in a threatening or ominous position. Any criminal, obviously, provides a fear factor. But Jesse Jackson is the one who said that when he's walking down the street at night and he hears footsteps behind him, that he's relieved when the footsteps are made by somebody who is not African American. Moment of real candor for him. And I appreciate him saying it. But I have this tension, and I'm going to give it to you without resolution. And it is that we want to have respect for law enforcement, but we also don't want to have a police state. The police do not have the authority to tell us what to do all the time. We are not required to obey them all the time. I have a friend who was in Maryland, and he was doing a picket. They had signs of aborted babies around an open public access street. They were on public property, exercising their First Amendment rights. The police told him to leave. He said, "We're not leaving. This is our right to be here." And they arrested him and a bunch of kids, teenagers, and literally threw them in jail. If my memory is correct, they spent the night in jail. And the police were sued and lost and had to pay, I don't know, like $60,000 or $70,000 per person for violating their constitutional rights. Now, my friend could have said, hey, the police told us to do this. We need to listen to the police. But the police aren't God, and the police are not the final arbiter of the law. All right? The supreme law of the land is the U.S. Constitution. So I give you that example by way of saying that not every police order is a lawful order, and this mix and match arbitrary decisions, I can see why Eric Garner was saying, why are you doing this to me? I just broke up a fight. I'm not selling anything. Now let's assume that he was selling cigarettes one at a time. Big deal. Really? Really? They had 5, 6 police there? And when they choked him and he fell down on the ground, he was saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He passed out at some point, and they just left him lying there. No one tended to him until they figured out that he wasn't breathing, and then he had died. All right? The way that they treated him was so disrespectful, was so barbaric. It showed real malice and that bully spirit. We're the cops. You do what we tell you, or we're going to choke you out and put you down. Grinding his face into the pavement like they did? Overselling cigarettes? Are you kidding me? And so the grand jury there refused to indict. Now, one of the shows that I saw discussing this, somebody said that the prosecutor in Staten Island did not want to indict. Did not want to indict the officer. And so the prosecutor gets to decide what the grand jury hears and sees. All right? Eric Holder has opened up an investigation, and I'm going to promise you this: that officer is going to be prosecuted federally. Officer Wilson in Ferguson will not be prosecuted, but Daniel Pentelio in New York is going to be prosecuted, guaranteed. They will find probable cause. They will say that his constitutional rights were violated. I'm not saying that he's going to be charged with murder in the federal government, but you can take it to the bank, in my opinion, and that he is going to be prosecuted federally. Well, Randall, what makes you say that? Mark Furman. Mark Furman was tried and acquitted by a jury for his part in beating Rodney King. You might recall that back in the 90s. And the federal government stepped in and tried him, Mark Furman, under federal law, and he spent between 2 and 3 years in federal prison after he was found guilty in federal court, okay? So I'm telling you that this is so egregious that Eric Holder, who I despise, by the way, Eric Holder and his Justice Department, they've opened up an investigation. I'm telling you, they're going to indict him for something. This officer is going to go to trial for killing this man with a chokehold that is illegal. I'll be right back. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. What would you rather have? Security or freedom? Safety? What do you choose? And the reason I'm asking, and again, to discuss this tension about the conflict that we're seeing and the conflict that I'm feeling regarding a police state versus freedom, is that throughout time, tyrants have arisen and they've used crises of various sorts to arrogate to themselves more power, all right? And most of us don't want to live in a police state, but we also don't want roaming gangs. We don't want gangs, violent gangs. We don't want to fear for our lives. We want order. We want safety. And so, as I've watched people say on Fox News who have been commenting on what happened in New York City with Eric Garner being choked to death, I have been shocked at the number of commentators who have sided with the police. And I'm shocked because it's so egregious. I mean, it's not even like they're giving pause. They're just defending the officer's right to do this. I mean, come on. It's excessive force. You're going to choke a man so violently that he actually dies over selling cigarettes, 1 and 2? He could have written the man a ticket. He could have written him an appearance warrant and just released him right on the spot, just a summons. Say, all right, look, I'm going to write you this summons. You got a court date at 9 a.m. about this. And then put it in the judge's lap. The judge can dismiss it, or the judge can say, issue a warrant, he's not here. If he didn't show up for his court date, the judge can issue a warrant for his arrest. In other words, de-escalate. De-escalate. But instead, they brought in policeman after policeman, and from the video I saw, all of them were white until it looked like a black female showed up. And they wrestled the man to the ground, just ground his face into the pavement, choked him so violently that he died. I don't want to live in that. I don't want to live in that. If that's the price of security, I don't want it. I don't want it. I'd rather have everyone armed. I'd rather have a country, say, well, what do you want, the Old West, the Wild West? Well, for all of the talk about the danger of the Wild West, it was actually pretty civilized. I think it was George Washington, our first president, who spoke of the most civilized society is a well-armed society. If you're in a room and everyone has a gun, then no one wants to get out of control, all right? No one wants to escalate. The ability for people to defend themselves, the ability for people to not need to call 911, but to defend themselves, see, that's liberty. And there's a level of security that comes with that liberty because you are allowed to protect yourself. And that's why some of these states have created laws that spell out the ability of self-defense, such as in Florida, the Stand Your Ground law. So, I don't know, I'm musing out loud about this because I get nervous when people on the right wing, conservatives, the religious right, talk about the need for obedience to authority and the need for order, and the police are right, they're the police, we should listen to them, and he should have done what they told him. There's truth in all of that. There really is. But the police aren't always right. And I don't want to live in a police state. The police come from us. It's we the people, all right? I don't want the police to think that they are omnipotent and that we have to follow their orders whenever they give us an order. I don't want to live there. I don't want to be in that state. And I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who said, if you won't obey the 10 commandments, then you're going to end up with 10,000 commandments. And I think that that's a part of what is going on now, is that our country has so collapsed in its morals that there are good people who want police to save us. Yes, and like people on Fox, all these people that are defending what the police officer did up in New York City. No, let me tell you, before I take this break, let me tell you the difference between a right-wing tyrant and a left-wing tyrant. The left-wing tyrant will take his foot off of your neck once in a while to let you breathe. I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years, and sadly we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. We have put together what we call an online university for you. Now that's a highfalutin way of saying that we have a pretty significant library of material, books, tapes, videos that are there for you for free. Why are we doing this? Because America is desperate for new leaders, and because this material could help you to become the leader that you and God want you to be. Check it out and enjoy it. We were talking off camera about David and Saul. And you may recall in the scriptures that Saul pretty much lost his mind, was trying to kill David, and David refused to stretch out his hand and to kill Saul. He had the chance. When Saul was relieving himself in the cave, David was in there and David could have killed him. And some of his men wanted him to do that. And he said, I will not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Ultimately, Saul was killed in battle. David was made king. And so some people might look at that and go, oh, look, he's the Lord's anointed. He's in charge. And we should therefore submit. Well, let me point out a few things. Number one, David didn't kill him. It was about killing Saul, not about whether David obeyed him. David didn't turn himself in. I mean, David kept fleeing. Number two, that's a historic record that is accurate. All right? In history, in the scriptures, there were times that they did kill the king. Okay? They killed foreign kings, Ehud, if my memory is correct. We had Deborah, the lady under Deborah's rule that killed Sisera, the commander of those foreign forces. We had Athaliah, the queen of Israel, who was slain, who was taken by the guards out of the temple and killed. And then her grandchild, if my memory is correct, Josiah, as an 8-year-old, began to reign. So they killed Athaliah. If you look at Romans chapter 13, it talks about obeying the powers that be, submitting. And it says that he, the civil magistrate, is the servant of God to thee for good, an avenger on those who do evil. He does not bear the sword in vain. Okay? Well, that passage has been used by some well-meaning people in America to say we always have to obey the law. In fact, I had a debate with Norman Geisler about the fact that Corrie ten Boom and the underground in Holland and other places who were hiding Jews from the Nazis, that they were wrong, that they were sinning by hiding the Jews because they weren't obeying the dictates of Romans 13. I mean, that kind of statism, that kind of, the state is God is insane. And I told Norman, guys, you're crazy. And I said, I hope that if my life is ever in danger, I don't come to you for help. So the founders of this republic took Romans chapter 13 and used it to justify the American Revolution, where they were killing officers, okay? They were killing officers of the law. They were killing British soldiers, enlisted men, officers, okay? And what they said was, Romans 13 teaches us that the civil magistrate is the servant of God to enforce the laws of God. If the civil magistrate betrays his duty before the Lord, then he has suspended his right to obedience. He's no longer the servant of God. He's the servant of evil. He's the servant of wickedness. And we have the right to resist him. We have the right to overthrow him. We have the right to start a war in which people are killed. I want you to do your own research. The founders of this republic, the theologians, used Romans chapter 13, the passage on submission and obedience, to justify the American Revolution because the civil magistrate had betrayed his duty to obey God. More food for thought. I'm telling you right now, I don't want to live in a police state.